Our next reading is at wordpress.com in a story written by Zarathalee entitled The Haunted BBC Micro. And Zarathalee begins, in I think February 1984, in the Common Era, economics teacher Ken Webster took a BBC Model B microcomputer to his home, from his school to his 17th century cottage in the Cheshire, Flintshire border village of Dodleston. I'm going to be fairly brief about the details of this case, which is extensively written up elsewhere, including in his book, The Vertical Plane, because I want to concentrate on something else. There were 3 people in the house. Zacchaeus Hundley, thank you for the super chat. Zacchaeus says, Happy New Year, everyone, in the NightTerrors family. So good to have you in the family, Zacchaeus, thank you. There were 3 people in the house. Ken, his girlfriend Debbie, and a musician who lived upstairs whose name I can't remember. It was Nick. That night he left the computer on, and the house was vacated when they went to the pub. On coming back, a poem had appeared on it. Over the next 16 months, a series of messages appeared to which he and some other people responded. Here are a few screenshots from a dramatic reconstruction. I shall explain. There was an apparent dialogue between Ken and Debbie and a person appearing to live in the 16th or 17th century called Thomas Hardiman, or Tomas. Living in the time before standardized spelling, so his name is uncertain. Who initially claimed to be a graduate of Jesus College, Oxford, and later Brasenose. They are both historical and grammatical inaccuracies in the messages purporting to be from the past. Thomas Hardiman is arrested for witchcraft and only released after Ken threatened the sheriff who arrested him, who was apparently also communicating. The messages are then interrupted from a source known only as 2109, possibly a year, which is more threatening and claims to be made of tachyons. Its spelling is also a little peculiar, with single consonants where he might put double ones. At the same time, there was poltergeist activity in the house, particularly the kitchen, where utensils tended to be piled up, and on one occasion Debbie came back to the house to find the cats nervous, and all the furniture piled up in one corner of the living room. Brasenose College helped me with the research, and it emerged that there was indeed such a person who was expelled from the college for refusing to remove the Pope's name from certain books in the library, which confirmed what had appeared in the messages. The Society for Psychical Research, or the SPR, then got involved, typing a number of their own questions into the computer without disclosing them to anyone. Sealed it in the room for an hour, and then deleted the messages. They got a reply which implied that 2109 was aware of their content. David of the SPR proceeded to ask the entity, if that's what it was, the solution to Fermat's last theorem, which was only found in 1994. It replied that the answer was only to be given if the questioner was prepared to lose soul, mind, and body, so they did not proceed. Harmon then said that he would write a book about the events to prove that they happened and hide it somewhere in the past, so that when it's found, it will be demonstrated that it wasn't a hoax. 2109 mainly seems concerned not to cause a temporal paradox. Oh, and the house was on a ley line, but then so was mine, so that's not unusual, writes the author. Harmon also mentioned that his house was made of red stone, and foundations of a building made of red stone were later found in the garden. Shane Barber, thank you for the super chat. And Happy New Year. Thank you, Shane. So the house which stood there before was like that, and Harmon complained about the alterations made to the house in the intervening 4 centuries. The mistakes made in the grammar and history were attributed to Harmon, or by Harmon, to interference by 2109. Both the SPR and more general skeptics, but Ken and Debbie, particularly Debbie, insist that it was not a hoax, and it's still unclear how it was done. Debbie was up in arms about it and expressed her annoyance at being accused of faking. She said she couldn't understand why people thought this way because she was not motivated to do such a thing. I've seen some annoyingly naive descriptions of how this might have been done. So I'll go into the situation as it was then. Both the internet and email did exist at that time. However, although it would be possible to connect a BBC Micro to the internet, not the web, of course, or to a bulletin board system, this computer was not connected in this way. BBC Micros do have local area network connectors in the form of Econet, but again, this was not connected, at least while it was in the cottage. The SPR suggested that signals were being sent along the earth line of the plug and the socket through the wiring of the house. Other than ROM, this BBC had no persistent memory. ROM meaning read-only memory. As it happens, this particular model was being used to run Edward, where word is spelled W-O-R-D, a ROM for word processing at the time. It was linked up to a green screen monochrome monitor, presumably without a Faraday cage, and there was a 5 1/4 floppy disk drive with disks available. The frustrating thing about the investigation so far is that no one seems to have investigated the hardware. The fact that the monitor was presumably unshielded means it would have been able to detect the signal. It would have been possible to detect the signal and read what was on it from nearby using a scanner of some kind if you were a computer genius in 1980. There was a dialogue, or at least appeared to be interactive, and although the BBC Micro could easily run a program like the Rogerian psychotherapist simulation Eliza, or the paranoid patient Perry, the sophistication of the responses means it passed the Turing test, which would have been quite an achievement for the primitive microcomputer. I regard all of this as a puzzle to be solved by naturalistic means because of the grammatical and historical errors. For instance, in the screen grab at the top, Bahaltha is a spelling mistake which would never have been made by an English speaker of that era. And what, W-T, is also incorrect because Middle English at the time strongly distinguished WH and W in speech. But this is only if everyone had a standard education back then, right? Which nearly everyone did not. The idea of the earth pin is interesting, although it seems to have been suggested ignorantly by someone who did not know much about computers. Welcome, Danielle. Good to see you, hon. It would in fact be possible with some hardware modification. The back of the BBC Micro looks like this. Let's take a look. UHF out. UHF. Maybe for audio alone? Anyway, video out. Looks like a BNC connector of some kind. Got your RGB. There's your monitor connector, RGB. RS-423, which is a serial port. Cassette, which is another, like a hard drive before they had hard drives. You could store things on cassette tape. Analog in, another serial port. There's the EcoNet, but look, it's like, in this machine at least, in this picture, it was never installed. And there's also another item here, unlabeled, which was never installed in this unit. Power is on the right and likely to carry the earth line. Even if it doesn't, one could be used. One of the other interfaces could be connected up to the earth, although I'm not sure which would be best.